Hello, and welcome to the first of our virtual Beyond the Bay presentations. My name is Kevin Maher, and I'm a member of the programming committee for the Bay Theater. I also write about classic movies for top10filmlists.com, and recently ended my career working for several of the Hollywood studios, including 20th Century Fox, Warner Brothers, and MGM. Just to quickly go over the format, tonight I'll be presenting Chinatown, giving some background on the movie, contextualizing its place, but I've made a specific point of not revealing or discussing any of the plot specifics. For everyone who hasn't seen the film, obviously the best way to appreciate it is to see it without any spoilers. For those who haven't seen it for a while, I think it's a great opportunity to think about what we talk about tonight against what you probably know about the film and have seen before, but then sort of marry the two. After you watch this, if you're so inclined, you can then go out to find a streaming option for Chinatown, which would be on any Apple or iTunes, Amazon, or Vudu, for instance. Any of those services. Watch the movie, and then at a future date, we'll have a live Q&A discussion that we'll set up. All the information will be available on the Bay website. So please do seek that out if you're interested. So tonight I'll be giving a general talk about Chinatown, which is one of my favorite movies. Every time I watch it, I think about the first time I saw it, which was in an after-school movie club that we had in high school. And each time I watch it, there's something new that I discover about it that makes me love it all over again. So I hope you enjoyed it as much as I do. But first, let me give you some information on why I feel the way I do. Chinatown was released in 1974 by Paramount Pictures and is primarily the product of four key individuals. As we all know, films take hundreds and hundreds of people to make. But in the case of Chinatown, there were four distinct personalities that really drove its creation, its production, and then its release into the world. The first of which was Robert Towne, who was the screenwriter. He had the initial idea for the project. He then approached his friend Jack Nicholson to star in the picture, who then was able to take it to Robert Evans, the producer, who at the time was the head of Paramount Pictures. And finally, Robert Evans coerced, I should say, Roman Polanski to come aboard and direct. Robert Towne spent 2 years researching the water scam of the early 1900s in Los Angeles and created a 380-page first draft of Chinatown. When he had pitched it to Evans, he had made it very simple. It was just a love story with a detective in Los Angeles in the 1930s. By the time Evans had brought on Roman Polanski, Towne had edited the script down to 180 pages, which is about a 3-hour runtime. The script still had no ending. It still annoyed anyone who read it because of its complex plot and minor characters that distracted and detracted from the main players in the film. Polanski agreed to help Towne edit the film, so they spent the summer of 1973 holed up in Polanski's rented home in Los Angeles, and they essentially broke down the entire 180-page script. Towne was fighting to keep everything in. Polanski was trying to reduce it down to its pure essence. By the end of the 2 months, the two weren't speaking, but the script was in a working condition that they then felt comfortable moving to the next phase. That next phase was hiring some of the secondary lead characters, most importantly, Evelyn Mulwray and Noah Cross. As had been mentioned, Jane Fonda was Evans' first choice for Evelyn Mulwray, but she wasn't uninterested. That didn't hurt. It didn't stop Evans from going after Faye Dunaway, but trying to get her on the cheap by leveraging Jane Fonda's apparent interest. They did finally settle on Faye Dunaway, who had been sort of in a descendant state since she splashed on the screen in Bonnie and Clyde in 1967. They then moved on to the part of Noah Cross. Nicholson suggested to Polanski, and Polanski immediately agreed that they should pursue John Huston. Nicholson at the time was dating Huston's daughter, Angelica, and revered the great director. So they both approached him. He was reluctant, but ended up being one of the sort of the pillars of the film. Sort of his performance cast such a domineering shadow over the entire film, and they brought him on. They then moved to production, which started in October of 1973. Polanski was given 68 days to shoot the film and a $6 million budget, but right away he started to have issues with the cinematographer. He had initially hired Stanley Cortez, who had worked with Orson Welles in the 40s. He had shot The Night of the Hunter in the 50s for Charles Laughton, one of the great, beautiful cinematic movies from the 50s in beautiful black and white. So Polanski respected him, but unfortunately their working styles were quite counter. Cortez came from the old school, which involved very planned camera movements and camera setups with as much artificial light as he could use. Whereas Polanski, coming from the European style, which was shoot as fast as you can, use natural light wherever and whenever possible, and get in, get out as quickly as possible. So Cortez lasted about a week on the set before Polanski fired him. He just couldn't take the methodical way that Cortez went about things. Polanski then hired John Alonzo, who hadn't really been a major cinematographer in Hollywood, but he came from documentary filmmaking with Jacques Cousteau. So he was used to quick setups, natural lighting, and very efficient work. Alonzo would go on to earn his only Academy Award nomination for shooting Chinatown, and his work is the sole credit for cinematographer on the film. Cortez's, it's really not clear how much of Cortez's shots were actually used in the final cut. Once they did get on set, however, and got the shots in line with what Polanski wanted, he then had to deal with Dunaway, who was notoriously a very difficult actress to work with, and she sort of took that to the nth degree on Chinatown, where in between every single take, she demanded her makeup to be retouched and retouched again, bordering on obsession. While they were shooting, she also developed a stammer that wouldn't allow for simple line readings, no matter how many tests or how many takes they did. So what they ended up doing in post-production is sort of stitching through multiple takes to smooth out her line readings. I've looked, and it's you can't see anything, but it's sort of the magic of what they had to do to get her performance where they wanted it to. Shooting went smoothly beyond those two elements. Polanski did wrap on time in January of 1974, and at that point he turned it over to his editor to do a rough cut while searching for a composer to do a score. Polanski chose a novice composer by the name of Lambro, and you needn't remember that name. He did a complete score. Polanski loved it. It was very very edgy and very harsh jazz and horn-infused sound. Evans appreciated it, but he wanted more. So he went to the composer and asked for 10 minutes more, which of course meant rewriting the entire score. They showed it to a small audience of the film crew, essentially. They didn't like it, but they moved forward and showed it to a preview audience in San Luis Obispo, California, a blind audience, and they overly emphasized how much they hated the music. So about a month before the film was due to release in June of '74, they went back and got a Evans went to Jerry Goldsmith, who at that time had been nominated for 5 Academy Awards, was a veteran composer. He watched the film without the soundtrack, saw immediately the Los Angeles of his youth, knew exactly how he was going to fill the silent, quiet moments of the film, but then also how he was going to build up the love theme, etc. He wrote the entire score in 8 days. They then took it to the Paramount Symphony Orchestra. They completed recording it in 2 days. So in 10 days, they went from no score to an Oscar-nominated score, the genius of Jerry Goldsmith. The film was now ready to release, and in most cases in the early 70s, a major release from a studio would play in maybe one screen in the larger metropolitan areas, with a 50-mile radius around that screen to protect it, called an A picture. At the time, however, there was changes afoot in the release patterns. So in 1972, The Godfather had been released more aggressively on all of 316 screens, which was a very wide release at the time. And by 1975, a year after Chinatown, Jaws would release on, I think it's close to 800 screens, and the blockbuster era was fully upon us. But Chinatown wasn't a film like that. It was more like sort of an art house film would be now, where it was adding screens as it went along. So it grew by word of mouth. The critics loved the film, all save Pauline Kael from New York, who I believe eventually went back and corrected her initial disdain for the film. But it was gaining wide traction. The box office was very strong. The 3 screens that it did play in Los Angeles were sold out for weeks upon its release. It ended up earning about $23 million in 1974, which made it the 19th highest grossing film of the year. Chinatown would go on to earn 11 nominations, 1 each for Evans, Nicholson, Polanski, Faye Dunaway, and then also 1 for Robert Towne, and which was the only win. Robert Towne won for Best Screenplay. Even in the revision process, Towne had admitted that much later, but he admitted that the movie was as much, in the script itself, was more Polanski, as much of Polanski as it was him by the time that the film finally started shooting. But Polanski did not, for what I know, I don't think he ever took credit for any of the writing on his films, and certainly not on Chinatown. So Towne did win sole credit and an Oscar on his own for Chinatown. After Chinatown, the main players had sort of a up and down career. Polanski is more widely known for his conviction of having sex with a minor in the mid-70s, so he is exiled in Europe properly now. And his films have been up and down. He did win a Best Director Oscar in 2002 for The Pianist, but many of his films have been not very well received. Nicholson, of course, went on to receive another 11 Academy Awards for acting, winning 3 times. He was probably the preeminent actor of the 70s, and one of the greatest of his generation. Robert Towne's career never achieved the level that it did with Chinatown. He wrote Shampoo in 1975, which was fairly well received, but was only nominated for 1 additional Oscar for Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan. But he so hated the production that he disavowed the screenwriting credit, assigning it to his dog's name, J.P. Bezic, I believe the dog's name was, on Greystoke. Unfortunately, Robert Evans had sort of the harshest deal after Chinatown. By September, so 3 months after Chinatown released, he was removed as head of production of Paramount in a power play with the financial folks. They did not like the power that Evans had being a producer on his own, in addition to being head of production. So they moved him aside and appointed a TV executive. TV at the time was the cash cow in the Paramount coffers. The ironic thing is that Paramount Pictures had its most profitable year in 1974, but the head of production didn't even last the calendar year. So that's Hollywood. After that, his life sort of spiraled out of control. He, due to drugs, some bad decisions, and some really bad films that he was associated with. He did stick around for a long time, though. He just died last year at the age of 89. So Robert Evans, certainly a very important, I could say, a paramount person in the history of Hollywood, but for a very short time, maybe 7 or 8 years. But he shone very brightly while he was in charge. I think one of the things about Chinatown that strikes me is the perfect mix of visuals, the dialogue, the story, the sort of the timelessness of it, and it goes to show that great art can be created through great difficulty and great struggle, whether it's self-inflicted, outside forces, or what have you. But Chinatown certainly withstands the test of time, and should be, and I think it always is, classified as one of the, if not the top 50, one of the top 100 films ever made in Hollywood. I hope you've enjoyed this abbreviated introduction to Chinatown. If you have any questions, please email me at kevin@baycommunitytheater.org. If you need any further information, please go to thebaytheater.com. Thank you again, and we look forward to the live Q&A forthcoming. Thank you.